If she wants sex so badly, why does she cry after? A question that feels like stepping into a storm you didn't see coming. You think it's pleasure she craves, but what if it's something else entirely? Something buried so deep that even she doesn't know what it is. Behind that moment of desire lies a battlefield of unconscious trauma, shame, and the aching hunger to be seen without judgment. We chase connection, but are we running from abandonment? What if the tears aren't weakness but rebellion? The body remembering a time it gave in when the soul wanted to say no. Don't laugh it off like, well, maybe she just didn't like your playlist. That moment of silence after passion, where you expect to smile and get tears instead, is not random. It's a signal. And it's terrifying, because it means your touch reached somewhere deeper than flesh. This isn't just about her. This is about all of us. What if the answer isn't found in the act, but in the ache that follows? Keep listening, because the truth doesn't just change the way you see her. It will shatter everything you believe about love, desire, and what it means to truly be known. Unconscious emotional trauma surfaces through physical intimacy in ways most people never expect. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. Long after the bruises of childhood neglect or heartbreak have faded, they continue to echo in our actions, our desires, our fears. Intimacy has a strange power. It's both a sanctuary and a spotlight. It exposes the parts of ourselves we keep buried under routines, smiles, and polished identities. And when that physical closeness comes, when two bodies collide in the illusion of unity, something deeper often stirs, something ancient and unresolved. For many, especially those carrying wounds they've never had the space or language to process, sex becomes a ritual of reenactment rather than release. They may chase the physical act, believing it will offer relief, validation, or a sense of wholeness. But what they find instead is an aftershock. The tears, the silence, the internal collapse. This is not weakness or confusion. This is the psyche screaming through the skin. Emotional trauma that lives unspoken in the subconscious finds its way out through the body. And there is no moment more vulnerable than after intimacy, when the masks drop and the nervous system begins to settle. In this space, defense is lower. The very act that was meant to unite can end up triggering hidden memories of abandonment, shame, betrayal, or coercion. Not because the other person did something wrong, but because the act itself reached into a vault that was never supposed to be opened. It's as if the body knows it has been touched, but the soul still feels untouched, unseen, unheard. That creates a profound split, one where the external experience of closeness contradicts the internal sensation of isolation, and that dissonance is devastating. Many people learn to associate intimacy with survival, not pleasure. A child who grew up needing to earn love through compliance or silence will often grow into an adult who confuses desire with duty. They may say yes when everything in them is screaming no. They may initiate out of fear of rejection or abandonment. They may crave touch, not for the joy of it, but to prove they are worthy of being held. And when the act is over and the performance ends, the raw truth begins to rise. The tears that follow aren't always conscious. They are the body's confession that something was not right, even if it looked perfect from the outside. It's not uncommon for someone to weep without fully understanding why. That's because trauma often hides behind pleasure. It waits for the moment when the body relaxes enough to speak. And when it does, it doesn't use words. It uses sensations, emotions, and involuntary responses. This phenomenon is not limited by gender or orientation. Anyone can experience it. But for women especially, conditioned for centuries to prioritize others' needs over their own, the layers run deep. A woman may desire sex intensely, yet be haunted afterward by an inexplicable sadness. That sadness may not be about the present moment at all. It could be her mother's grief, her own past experiences, or cultural shame passed down like an inheritance. The pain is often layered, invisible, and deeply embedded. And when intimacy stirs those layers, the emotional reaction can feel overwhelming. It is not about regret, it's about recognition. Her body remembering moments when she felt powerless, unheard, unseen. Moments that the conscious mind has learned to forget, but the nervous system has never stopped responding to. And so the post-sex tears become a release, a purge, an involuntary reaction to a wound that was touched without permission. This isn't about blaming partners or shaming desire. It's about understanding that intimacy is not just physical, it's psychological, emotional, and spiritual. And when we approach it without that awareness, we risk confusing tears for regret, when they're actually signals of unresolved trauma seeking expression. True healing begins when we stop interpreting these reactions as weaknesses and start seeing them as messages. When we realize that sex is not always just an act of pleasure, it can be a mirror. And what it reflects back can be terrifying. Some people cry because they feel safe for the first time. Others cry because they feel utterly alone, despite the closeness. Some tears are old, so old they don't have words. They come from that child who never got to say no, or that teenager who learned to perform love to survive. They come from generations of conditioning that taught people to value themselves through someone else's desire. And when all of that gets stirred in one moment of vulnerability, the reaction is not rational. It is primal. It is the heart breaking open under the weight of memories too long ignored. And yet, this is not something we talk about. We dismiss it. We joke about it. We pretend it's hormonal or dramatic or confusing. But it's none of those things. It's truth. It's pain. It's the soul's way of saying, there's more to this than you're seeing. Understanding that unconscious trauma surfaces through physical intimacy requires us to redefine how we approach connection. It demands compassion, patience, and a willingness to hold space for discomfort. It calls us to ask deeper questions, not just, was it good? But, how did it make you feel afterward? Not just, did you enjoy it? But, did you feel safe, seen, whole? Because until we create a culture where those questions are welcome, we will continue to confuse pleasure with healing and silence with satisfaction. Desire often masks a deeper longing for connection and validation, though it rarely announces itself that way. On the surface, it looks like attraction, craving, excitement, the magnetic pull between two bodies, a glance that lingers, the way hands reach for skin as if they're trying to answer a question without asking it. But underneath that surface energy, something quieter, more desperate is at play. We are not just drawn to people for the pleasure they offer. We're drawn to them because we want to be seen, needed, known. Desire becomes a mask, a beautifully convincing one, that hides the aching truth that what we really want is not the body, but the belonging. The warmth of breath against your skin is only intoxicating because of what it represents, that you are not alone, that you matter to someone in this vast and chaotic world. Human beings are wired to seek validation, not in the shallow sense of needing compliments, but in the existential sense of wanting to be significant in someone else's world. When desire shows up, it often borrows the language of lust, but it's secretly speaking the dialect of emotional hunger. We don't just want touch, we want touch to prove that we're worthy of being touched. We don't just want intimacy. We want intimacy to confirm that we're not invisible. That's why so many people feel hollow after pleasure. Not because the experience was wrong, but because it didn't answer the deeper need that sparked the desire in the first place. The kiss didn't carry the meaning they hoped it would. The embrace didn't erase the loneliness. The closeness still felt distant. There's an urgency to desire that tricks us. It tells us, if I get this, I'll finally feel whole. But that urgency is a symptom, not a solution. It's the alarm bell of an inner void, calling out for something more permanent, more rooted. And the tragedy is that so many people don't realize it. They chase partner after partner, high after high, confusing the intensity of chemistry with the safety of love. They tell themselves they're just exploring, expressing, enjoying, but the tears that follow, the emptiness that creeps in afterward, tell a different story. That story begins in childhood, in the way we first learn to associate love with approval, or attention with worth. If we were only held when we were good, or only praised when we performed, then desire in adulthood becomes a kind of performance too. We try to earn what we believe we're not inherently worthy of. And in that transaction, we lose ourselves. This is why validation becomes the fuel for so much of our intimate behavior. The way someone looks at you, touches you, wants you, it feels like proof. For a moment, the internal doubt is silenced. You think, maybe I'm enough after all. But when that person leaves or the high fades, you're left with the same question you had before it all began. Do I matter without this? That's the invisible hunger hiding beneath the visible desire. And it's powerful. It can lead people to stay in relationships that hurt them, just to feel wanted. It can make someone give their body when their heart isn't ready, just to avoid the terror of rejection. It can make someone confuse dominance with love, attention with care, and pleasure with connection. What makes this dynamic so dangerous is that it often plays out unconsciously. People don't realize they're seeking validation through desire. They think they're being bold, confident, expressive, but they're acting from a place of deep emotional need. And when those needs aren't met, not because the other person failed, but because they were never equipped to fill that void in the first place, the response can be devastating. Shame creeps in, self-worth erodes, the pattern repeats. They seek more desire to fill the emptiness left by the last one, not realizing that the more they seek it externally, the more disconnected they become from themselves. Desire is not the enemy. It's natural, beautiful, powerful. But when it becomes a mask for unmet emotional needs, it becomes exhausting. Every interaction feels high stakes. Every compliment becomes currency. Every moment of intimacy carries the silent question, will this finally make me feel whole? And that pressure is too much for any one person or experience to bear. The real work begins not when we deny desire, but when we interrogate it. When we ask ourselves, what do I hope this will give me that I can't give myself? That's where healing starts, not by avoiding connection, but by understanding the motive beneath it. When we learn to validate our own existence, to hold space for our own worth, to witness ourselves without needing someone else to do it first, then desire transforms. It becomes a genuine expression of connection, not a desperate attempt to earn it. And in that space, intimacy becomes freedom, not performance. Sex becomes presence, not proof. Love becomes choice, not compulsion. That's what we're truly after. Not just to be desired, but to be safe in our desire. Not just to be touched, but to be met in the places where words don't reach. Until then, desire will continue to be a mask we wear over our emptiness, hoping someone will recognize us beneath it. But no one can validate what we ourselves are afraid to claim. The journey inward is not as glamorous as the thrill of pursuit, but it's the only one that ever leads to peace. Tears reveal the conflict between body consent and emotional readiness in a way that words often can't. In the moment of physical closeness, when the body says yes or appears to respond with openness, there's often a deeper layer of truth quietly trying to surface, one the conscious mind may not even fully grasp. Emotional readiness doesn't always align with physical willingness. A person may agree to intimacy, not out of wholehearted desire, but out of fear of disappointing someone, fear of being abandoned, or fear of being misunderstood. And while the body might go along, mimicking agreement, the soul may still be whispering no. That whisper becomes a scream the moment the experience is over, the silence after, the sudden collapse into tears, the confusion about what just happened, all of it points to a fracture that's been growing beneath the surface. A fracture between what the body allowed and what the heart was not yet prepared for. Many people grow up learning that their body must obey, that saying yes is safer than saying no. Cultural scripts, family expectations, and past experiences can all shape the way someone approaches intimacy. They may have learned to disconnect their emotions from their physical self, to treat sex like a task, a transaction, a duty, or even a currency. This disconnection can become so normalized that they no longer pause to ask themselves what they truly want or whether they feel emotionally safe in the moment. They override their inner voice so often that it goes quiet. But the body remembers, the emotions remember, and they wait. Sometimes they wait until after the act is done, when the room is quiet, the lights are low, and the pretense has lifted. That's when the tears come. They are not a mystery. They are the only language left for a soul that wasn't ready to be that vulnerable. This is not about regret in the conventional sense. It's about realization, often delayed, of a boundary crossed internally, even if everything looked consensual on the outside. Tears reveal that the emotional self felt invaded, even if the physical self complied. They point to a misalignment that can be subtle but profoundly unsettling, and this internal conflict is not rare. It is common among people who have experienced emotional neglect, abandonment, or past trauma. They may not have learned how to check in with their emotional state before engaging physically. They may confuse attraction with emotional readiness, or mistake attention for love. And so they find themselves in situations where their body participates while their heart stands in the corner, arms crossed, silently watching, waiting for the moment it all falls apart. That fall apart often happens when the intensity fades and reality creeps back in. The body begins to relax, and in that space, emotions come rushing in, unfiltered, raw, honest. Sometimes it's guilt, sometimes it's shame, sometimes it's sorrow for not listening to oneself. And those emotions have nowhere to go except out through the eyes. The tears are not weakness, they are clarity. They say what the person couldn't say aloud in the moment. They speak the truth of misalignment, of an inner self that was still holding back, even while the outer self was giving in. This isn't about blaming the partner or framing the situation as abuse. It's about recognizing how complex the human experience of consent truly is. Saying yes with your body doesn't always mean you're saying yes with your whole being. Emotional readiness is about safety. It's about trust. Not just in the other person, but in yourself. Do you trust that you'll speak up if something feels off? Do you trust that your voice will be heard if you change your mind? Do you trust that you're not just going along to avoid conflict or keep someone interested? These are the questions that live beneath every intimate exchange, even when they're never spoken. And when the answer to those questions is uncertain, the emotional system holds the tension. It stores it like static in the background until the moment is over and the noise is too loud to ignore. Then it erupts, not in anger or protest, but in tears, because tears are the only safe release for a person who feels too much and speaks too little. This is not a matter of logic. It's not something that can be reasoned away or dismissed as mood swings or oversensitivity. The body may be able to lie convincingly in the moment, but the heart cannot be silenced forever. Emotional readiness requires emotional presence. It requires self-awareness and a sense of agency. Without it, intimacy becomes performance rather than expression. And the performance always has a cost. That cost is often paid in the quiet moments after, when the lights go out and the ache sets in, not in the body, but in the soul. The ache of having crossed an invisible line, not because someone else forced you, but because you didn't know how to stop yourself. That is where the tears come from the realization that you wanted to be close, but not like that you needed to be held, but not touched, that you were hoping for connection, but settled for contact. To understand this conflict is to see intimacy not just as physical engagement, but as a sacred intersection of mind, body, and emotion. When any one of those elements is missing or ignored, the experience may still happen, but it doesn't land in the heart the way it should. It leaves residue, it leaves questions, it leaves tears. And those tears deserve to be honored, not dismissed. They are the body's truth, speaking when the voice couldn't. They are the signal that something important was overlooked. They are the beginning of healing, if we choose to listen. Post-intimacy grief can stem from unmet psychological and spiritual needs that lie dormant beneath the surface of desire. In the moment of physical union, people often believe they are finally arriving at something real, something validating, healing, and deeply satisfying. But when the act ends and the silence sets in, what's left is not always peace or closeness, but a strange sense of emptiness, disconnection, or even sorrow. This grief isn't always obvious. It doesn't scream. It hums quietly, like a question with no answer. It lingers in the way someone turns away instead of leaning in the tears that fall without explanation, in the heaviness in the chest that feels out of place after something that was supposed to bring joy. The body may have been touched, but the soul remains untouched, and it's this gap that grief often emerges from. Many people carry wounds that go far beyond the physical. These wounds are psychological, shaped by years of emotional neglect, rejection, or abandonment. They are spiritual, the result of feeling disconnected not just from others, but from their own sense of worth, purpose, and truth. When intimacy occurs without these deeper layers being acknowledged or cared for, it can feel incomplete, even violating, though not in the obvious sense. The person may have given full consent, may have wanted the experience, may have even enjoyed it in the moment. But afterwards, when the distractions fade, the deeper needs that were never met rise to the surface, and they don't arrive quietly. They speak in the form of grief. This grief is often misunderstood. Society tends to treat sex as an end point, something you achieve, something that's supposed to resolve tension, bring people closer, validate love. But for many, it does the opposite. It reminds them of what they didn't receive. They wanted to be seen, but instead, they were looked at. They wanted to be understood, but instead, they were touched. They wanted to feel connected, but instead, they felt used, even if the other person had no harmful intent. The grief doesn't come from the physical act itself, but from what the act failed to deliver. It exposes the emotional and spiritual hunger that still remains unfulfilled. At the core of this grief is a longing to be mirrored, to be known not just in the body, but in the soul, to be recognized in a way that says, I see you, I honor your vulnerability, I care about your inner world. When that need is unmet, even the most tender touch can feel hollow. The body may respond with pleasure, but the heart remains untouched, guarded, or worse, disappointed. This is where the spiritual dimension of the grief comes in. We are not just physical beings seeking release. We are emotional and spiritual beings seeking communion. When sex is used as a shortcut to intimacy, it often backfires, leaving people more lonely than they were before, because it promised something it couldn't deliver. That loneliness, that post-intimacy ache, isn't irrational. It's the soul mourning what it hoped would arrive through connection but never did. The psychological need for safety, acceptance, and being deeply understood isn't erased through physical closeness. It's highlighted, and if those needs were never acknowledged or nurtured, the intimacy can bring them screaming to the surface. Suddenly the person finds themselves crying, withdrawing, or feeling ashamed, not because they did anything wrong, but because they touched a space inside that is still so wounded, so unheld, so unseen. The grief is a response to that inner child still waiting to be chosen, still hoping that someone will come along who doesn't just want their body, but cherishes their being. Spiritual needs are rarely spoken of in modern conversations about intimacy, yet they are essential. These needs include the desire for meaning, for sacredness, for a sense of being part of something larger than oneself. When intimacy is reduced to performance or gratification, it can feel soulless, even when it is consensual and technically satisfying. Something sacred gets lost, and the heart knows it. The tears that come after, the numbness, the confusion, they are all ways the soul tries to express that something essential was missing. The person may not even know what it is. They just know that they feel more fragmented than whole, more isolated than loved, more empty than fulfilled. And still, this grief is rarely talked about. People brush it off as mood swings, hormones, or oversensitivity. They don't realize that what they're feeling is not only valid, but deeply human. We are wired not just to seek pleasure, but to seek meaning. Not just to be wanted, but to be valued. When sex bypasses these core needs, it leaves behind a quiet sorrow. The sorrow of having reached out for connection and returned with only the echo of one's own unmet needs. This doesn't mean that intimacy is wrong or dangerous. It means that we must approach it with awareness. We must recognize that the body is only one part of the equation, and that beneath every yes, there might be a deeper question. Will this experience honor who I truly am? If the answer is no, the soul will respond with grief, even if the mind tries to rationalize it. That grief is not weakness, it is wisdom. It tells us where healing is still needed. It shows us the places where love hasn't yet reached. It invites us to listen to ourselves more deeply, to honor the truth that we are more than physical beings seeking satisfaction. We are emotional and spiritual beings seeking resonance, alignment, and wholeness.